Welcome back to Pender's Garage. In this episode, I'll be continuing with the repairs on my 1969 Chevelle. Once that's done, I plan on doing something with the exhaust, and then once that's done, I'll take the car out and have some proper fun with it. So, if you haven't already, please subscribe, as I would greatly appreciate it, and it really does help me out. So, let's get started. One of the things that was missing on this car when I got it was these little screens, little covers that go here on the cowl. As you can see, they've got this tape kind of covering it up where it would go. So I'll get this off of here. All that cleaning up. Ordered these dudes off of eBay. I got these ones because they were the cheapest ones plus shipping. There's this little piece here. It's just a little clip. Bracket is used on the right hand screen opening on AC cars. And right hand front screw of valve bracket. Okay. Well, I'll do that one last. So I will note it's a little warped. It'll probably stay in okay, but I suppose maybe it's supposed to be like that. I don't know. I'm not sure. There you go. Popped right into place. Looks just fine. Now this guy. Okay. There's that one. So this dude here is just a little bit different. So on the AC cars only, you have this little clip here. And then there's one little screw on this side you gotta take out, and then you'll use that screw to hold this right side on. That's not ideal. Use a ratchet. Thing's tight. Wow. Holy moly. Tap on this screw a little bit. Well, that's unfortunate. This segment shouldn't take this long. This screw's pretty tight, so I went ahead and grabbed myself a pry bar. Carefully put pressure down on the screw. By the way, this is just a Phillips, number 2 Phillips bit in a ratchet adapter here. Just slowly put pressure and turn on this screw. There we go. Okay. So this end over here will just kind of flap in the wind if you don't put this little bracket in. That's perfect. There we go. That's good. And we're done. So if you guys remember, I had started to try and figure out what was going on with the hesitation we were having off park throttle. It was really, really bad whenever I bought the car. I had to be real careful at stoplights and things, taking off from a stop. Most of the time it would die. The only way it wouldn't die would be if I just went straight to mid throttle, and then it would have enough signal at the booster that it would just take off. But it's a wonder I didn't get pulled over and ticketed for how many times it chirped the tires taking off from stoplights. So I drove it home the whole way like that. Luckily, it was mostly interstate driving on the way back. As soon as I got back, I started looking into it. I had no accelerator pump at all. And so something was stuck or gummed up with the accelerator pump. I pulled the nozzle off and cleaned it out real good, and we were able to get some pump shot out of the accelerator pump. and that made it better. And I drove around a little bit like that, and it was certainly better having some accelerator pump. Still wasn't perfect. We'll go ahead and probably ditch this Holly. I don't really love these cheaper Hollies like this. They're fine carburetors. They're just not my favorite. Well, if you guys remember, on my way home in this car, I had some noises coming from this alternator. I suspected it was a bearing, and so I shot some grease in it to kind of help quiet it down, and it did. And it got me home, and it's actually still pretty quiet, but I really don't want to leave it that way, so I'm going to go ahead and yank this alternator out and send it off to my local alternator shop and have them rebuild it. I could just buy one from a parts store, but since I've got a local alternator guy, I'd kind of like to give him some business, and they've always been really good to me. So I'll get this dude out of here, and we'll get it sent off. When I was bringing this car home, I was worried that this big bolt might break, and it still may. But now that I'm home, I'm less worried about it. It's feeling like it's definitely going to, so that's fun. Is it even loosening? Yes, it is. Let me shoot some penetrating oil down in there. I'm gonna go back and forth with it a little bit. Try to help it not break. Oh my goodness. Wow. Let's go the other way again. I hope the guy didn't shove a standard bolt in a metric thread. I don't know if these Vortec heads have standard or metric. I bet the threads are boogered. Got a strong feeling I'm going to be Healy coiling this. It's getting better. Well, I'm happy it didn't break. Okay, before I take that all the way out, I am going to go ahead and take the wire loose. I'll go ahead and undo the battery too. There we go. It's the moment of truth. Oh, threads are in great shape on the bolt. Just looks like it had a bunch of crud and stuff maybe packed into the threads. I don't know. We'll clean it up and we'll see. Might have gotten lucky. There she is. Send this dude off. Oh yeah. So it's not making the kind of noises it was whenever I was bringing it home, but it's still, yeah, it's still way noisier than it should be. Alrighty. Moving on now, I'm going to go ahead and dive into my absolute favorite part, which is fixing things under the dash and into the instrument cluster. A few things going on here, and they're all super common stuff with classics. So all the backlighting doesn't work for the gauges, so I'd really like to get that fixed. And then the only other thing is the switch here for the wipers is not really attached to the bezel here. So when I have the bezel out to check the bulbs, I'll go ahead and mount that. And then the HVAC has some issues as well. The blend door, well, it doesn't really work. It's kind of stuck. So we'll have to look into that and see if maybe the cable is frozen or the door is frozen. Something's going on because I can't move it. And then whenever I switch to different positions and things, I can hear that at certain positions there are some vacuum leaks going on. So I'll have to sort through all the vacuum lines and make sure they're all sealed up good, and then make sure all my actuators work like they should as well. We may end up popping a radio in this thing. We'll see. If I do put one in it, I'd like to get the kinds that are meant to go in a classic like this so that you don't have to chop anything up. Being that this one hasn't been chopped up yet, because a lot of them already have been. I can always do that later. It doesn't have to be done right now. As far as taking stuff out though, I'll probably just pull the main bezel here out for all the gauges. I'll probably pull the glove box out of the car too,
to give myself some better access to some things, but I do not want to pull a whole dash out of here. I just have a few issues to fix, and so we'll get in, fix those issues, and get out. I'll try to record it the best I can, but I'm sure, as you can imagine, you probably won't be able to see too much of what's going on. I probably won't even be able to see much of what's going on. I'll be doing a lot of the work blindly, just having to do it by feel. Please don't hate me if I don't show every single detail. As you can see, I got this cluster assembly and all this stuff out. Our main tight cable that wouldn't move. Number one, the cable was bent down here at the unit, so I straightened it out. And then way back in here, this door right here, it was frozen. After tapping on it a few times and breaking it free, that sort of fixed it, and then I went ahead and lubricated all of it real good. And so now it does work like it should. All the rest of them work fine, but I did go ahead and lube them up. So from in here, what I'll do is see if I can't track down all my vacuum leaks. The only thing on this vehicle that's controlled by vacuum is the recirculation or outside air doors. So there's one there, and then there's the one in the cowl. And that's really it, other than the heater control valve, this guy right here. So only those three things are controlled by vacuum. None of them are working. Of course, the heater one isn't working because at some point the vacuum line broke and then it never was hooked back up. So I'll hook this back up so that will hopefully work. I'll verify it later. And so the very first thing I wanted to do was just make sure that the vacuum reservoir was okay. So the way I test those, here's your reservoir here. On the back, you've got the inlet, which is the big hose right here, going to manifold vacuum. And then you get the little one on the back here that comes out. So I run that over to a vacuum gauge, and this engine with the cam that's in it, we only had about 13.5 to 14 inches of mercury vacuum. So not awesome, but it should be enough to run, should be enough to run these things. My point in hooking up the vacuum to it though wasn't to see how much vacuum we had, it was to see if it held vacuum. And this one is holding vacuum quite well. It stayed right there at the 13.5 for about 30 minutes now. So I'd say it holds vacuum just fine. So now I'll move on down the line and see where I'm not getting vacuum. Or if the actuators are getting vacuum and the actuators just aren't any good. We'll see. This actuator right here wasn't working. I pulled this thing back and saw that the hose isn't hooked up to it. We'll hook that back up and then it might start working. Let's see. Okay, so that's it for the vacuum actuated stuff. The circulation door down there, and then of course this door up here is now working like they should. I didn't have to do anything to that one. It was already hooked up good and the hose is still in good shape. Biggest thing is that one wasn't hooked up. And of course that was creating my hissing noise that I was hearing under the dash. In the future though, I am going to verify that my heater control valve is working. I've verified it does have vacuum going to it, which is the main thing for me, so I can go ahead and put my dash and stuff back together. Whenever you pull the glove box out on these, I found out you do have to take the actual glove box off, or you really can't get the front door off. So I pulled that off, and underneath it, sitting like this, is this little Taco Bell wild card. This one here is dated 1993. You can get $5 off SeaWorld, or $2 off the purchase of any regular price CD or cassette. Thought that was kind of neat. At this point, the rebuilder was done with my alternator, so I went ahead and threw it back on. Concerning our instrument cluster backlighting, the main issue turned out to be just a blown instrument cluster fuse. So as you can see here is the gauge cluster and everything. I did pull all this out because I had to really to do the HVAC and whatnot. In a perfect world, if I was just diagnosing the lights, I would have started with the easiest thing, which would have been the fuse, considering the fact that all of our bulbs don't work. So these are the little sockets that will hold your bulbs. I am missing a couple bulbs. A couple of these were already kind of popped out, so I would have had to have pulled this out anyways to get to these and put new bulbs in and whatnot. Our light's on, and I can sit here and try to ground this out on here, and as you can see, I don't have any bulb lighting. One of the reasons why I didn't automatically assume fuse is because our little gauges here, as you can see, I can change the lighting. It's wired into the instrument cluster fuse. But that being said, you do have to account for the fact that they may have put the wire in on the right side instead of putting it on the left side. So it travels from here to the left, but if your fuse is blown, well, it's not gonna make it to the left. But since this one's on the right, it's not a fused circuit. So we are gonna move this one over to this side. I highly doubt those lights draw hardly any amperage. So I'll go get one, we'll pop it in, and I suspect a lot of our backlighting will be fixed. From there, once the new fuse is in, we'll see if it blows it immediately. And if it does, we'll have to track down the short. I'm hoping that it doesn't blow immediately and that it was blown for some other reason, or that somebody did something and that made it blow, and who knows, we'll see. I've had a lot of situations like this where the fuse was blown and I put a new fuse in and it never blew again, so we'll see what happens. I've got my new fuse popped in. So everything works on this side, but on this side I've got a couple bulbs I need to change out, so I will get those changed out. So far the fuse has not blown, we'll see. Now as far as this wiper switch goes, I did go ahead and fix that, sort of, more or less rigged it. So I noticed all these little screws that it had were quite small. That one's gone. And well, they really weren't grabbing onto anything anymore. Plastic has sort of swelled out and some of it's kind of cracked up too. But I went ahead and just threw some bigger number 10 screws in there to hold it in there. And it seems to be working okay. I reckon it'll last at least a little while. Well, that's it for all of the main repairs inside the car. Now all I gotta do is put all of this back together.
Nice.
Alrighty guys, well, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the Holley carburetor off of the Chevelle. I just don't want to screw with it anymore. I really haven't put much into it, but I'm gonna reveal something to you guys. It's probably gonna be a little bit shocking to you. And that is that I tend to prefer Edelbrock carburetors, especially over Holley carburetors. And before all you Holley guys go unsubscribing and give me all kinds of hate for it, hear me out, okay? My biggest reason for loving and sticking with Edelbrock carburetors, especially on my just daily drivers, cruisers, not high performance applications, is very simple. Number one, because I'm already outfitted for these. I keep the jets, I keep the metering rods, I keep the springs, I keep all those parts. And whenever you're set up for one thing, well, it just makes life easier. That's just the way I look at it. I could go out and buy all the different, accelerator pump cams and just all the different things I could do to specifically mess with the Holley carburetors. But I'm not going to mess with the one that's on that Chevelle. It's kind of their, basic economy, just gets you a carburetor. If it had one of their nicer lines of carburetors on it, I would probably keep it and just fine tune it. This is an Edelbrock that I've had forever and ever that I'm going to go ahead and finish putting back together. I pulled it apart here a long time ago, honestly, for a different project. It's a 750
Performer series, so nothing fancy, nothing real exotic going on here. But whatever it was for, I ended up deciding to cut the choke horn off and kind of radius everything, smooth everything out. So it might actually be a 750 now. I think the engine that's in that Chevelle is lacking carburetor. It's got a 600 CFM on it right now. I can tell the car's got a little bit more than factory camshaft in it. It's got Vortec heads on it, and the engine's 350 cubic inches. I think it needs a little bit more than a 600 CFM on it. I'm more or less putting it on just to see how the car reacts to it. And it very well may end up staying on the car. The only reason why it probably won't is because I would like to have a choke, of course, now after I've got the choke horn on. So this is more just a placeholder. Eventually, I'd like to put Edelbrock's new AVS2 carburetor on it. I've put those on a few different customer cars in the past, and I really, really liked it. I do like how the air door for the secondaries on those AVS2s are adjustable. But on these old Performers, your secondary air door is just weighted. So it's got a counterweight, and then as soon as it sees airflow through here, it will overcome the amount that the weight is, and it will open up so that you can actually have your booster. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish putting this thing together. My other big thing with these carburetors is I love that they just don't leak. Hollies are notorious for that. You got so many spots. I don't have a Holly right here to show you, but you can imagine, with those, you got float bowls that hang off the front and rear, and those have a gasket. Your metering block has a gasket. And then with Hollies, your base plate and your body are two pieces. You can imagine with your base plate being so thin, eventually they tend to warp. So yeah, it's a lot more headache long term. Short term, they're fine. Long-term ownership of a Holly, you're going to have to do more with it to keep it up to par. Whereas with these, you just put them on and you run them. This paper gasket that goes between the top of the carburetor and the body, that's the only gasket. And it is above the fuel level. I've never had one leak. The other thing I really love about this carburetor is it is 99% metal. The only thing in here that's rubber is the seal for the plunger on your accelerator pump. And that's that seal right there. And I've never really had a problem with one. They seem to do quite fine. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Of course, the actual sort of shaft here for the accelerator pump is made of plastic, but I've never had an issue with it either. In my opinion, these are just a far better option for people like me who just don't like messing with their stuff. They want to put it on, set it up, and leave it and not have any issues. And this is your carburetor for that, if that's what you're interested in. As far as performance goes, in case you guys haven't noticed, majority of what I'm doing with these cars and things is not performance oriented. It's not building road course racing cars. It's not really building drag cars, just cars that you drive on the street, you have fun with. And this will do that for you. Most of the ones I pick up are from swap meets and things like that. There's always plenty of them there. And one that needs rebuilt, a lot of times I pick them up for like between $60 and $100. And for having basically your entire fuel delivery system for $100, and then you spend $20-30 rebuilding it. And these are really, really pretty simple, easy carburetors to rebuild. Very, very simple, very easy to see how they function. If you're a beginner, these are a great carburetor to be able to see how carburetors work, because you can see most of all the functions of the carburetor with the way these are designed. Without getting too in-depth and exhausting you guys, I will go ahead and put this thing back together, and we'll pull that old Holly off the Chevelle, pop this one on, and take it for a test drive. There we go, all back together. Took a whole 8 minutes. Now don't get me wrong, don't take this to think that I don't like Holly carburetors, okay? I love Holly carburetors. I love most all carburetors.
And I believe they all have things that they're better at. And so there's situations in which I love having a quadrijet on something. There's situations where I love having a Holly, and there's a lot of situations where I love having an Umbra. That's enough stuff hooked up to be able to start it real fast. So many of you may have seen me hovering over the carburetor, looking down it. So the reason why I'm looking down there is to see if my accelerator pump was working, and it's not. And I was kind of afraid of that. I didn't say anything whenever I was putting it in, but I noticed when I was putting the accelerator pump in that the seal was kind of warped because I had put all the parts in a little baggie, and they've been sitting in that bag for like 2 or 3 years. So I'm going to go ahead and yank it out. I've got a new accelerator pump for it. So I'll show you guys what I'm talking about here. As you can see, whenever I stored it, I had laid some things on top of it apparently, and that caused the actual pump seal here to warp up. So it was working. I had some accelerator pump, but it's not working like it's supposed to, since this is not getting a very good seal. So out with the old, and I honestly think this is a pump out of the smaller, like 600 CFM, because it's got the blue seal. Could be wrong, but and maybe they've just changed it up, but this is the right one for the 750 Performer. They look very similar, but if you look, you can see that the spring isn't quite the same, and the seal on this one is a little bit different too. Not by much. I don't know. Maybe it's had the wrong one all this time. I've had that carburetor on like 2 or 3 vehicles. It worked fine for the most part, but who knows? Maybe it's never been quite right. If I can get this thing open. Well, goodness. I got some good staples over there that I brought. Okay. Plop our new one in and see if our accelerator pump works like it should. Oh yeah. We're good. Easy enough. Do that real fast like that on your Holly. I dare you. Cool beans. Let's fire it up. Much better. Today, I've decided to put some different mufflers on this Chevelle. I like the way it is now, don't get me wrong. It's got some turbo mufflers on it right now, and they are nice and quiet, and I may change my mind. No matter what, I'm gonna change the oil in the car, and then after that today, we're gonna take the car on a little cruise. I've got some friends that are wanting to cruise over to a local pub, and so we're gonna all meet up
take the scenic route and cruise over there together, eat some lunch. So that'll be a good test of this car and kind of seeing how everything's doing now. I'll check back in when we get to the shop to change out these mufflers. We got the car in the shop, got it up on the lift, and started to evaluate what I wanted to do for the exhaust. I was just going to replace these turbo mufflers with glass packs and keep the tailpipes, but I decided to cut out all the old junk. And the reason for that is because up to the inlet of the mufflers was 2.5-inch pipe, which I'm fine with. But after the muffler, it necked down to 2.25-inch pipe. I don't really care for that, because whenever you do a crush bend like this on 2.25-inch pipe, the inner diameter is really more like 1 5/8 by 2 1/16, whenever you account for wall thickness and the crush. Also, this can happen when you're not careful when doing crush bending, and, well, it's not ideal. So I went ahead and just did some side exits, which is what I tend to always do anyways, just because it's cheap, easy, and aesthetically, it excites my inner child. Let me know what you think. Is it better? Is it worse? One thing is for sure, this is about the cheapest exhaust a person can do that is still halfway legal. Since that's done, I'm gonna get cruising and enjoy the car the best way I know how. Just came up on a tractor rally. A local tractor club is taking over the streets right now. They got a whole police escort and everything. So this quick little day trips probably turned into quite the excursion now. Well, as expected, the car did great all the way there and back. Now, the only thing left to do is have some real fun with it.